So now it's widely believed that the alien skull which appears in Predator 2 was the origins of the Aliens vs Predator idea? Well, it isn't really.
Hold up, wait a minute.
Don't get me wrong, I used to believe this too until I did some research recently. Now at the risk of sounding like one of those nerds who start a sentence with the words well actually while smugly raising their glasses by the bridge of their nose. Well actually the alien skull you see in Predator 2 is a reference to the Alien vs Predator comic book series that was released a fair bit before the movie, so that's the real origins of Aliens vs Predator. Regardless of how the idea came about, it's always been an interesting concept, where instead of us mere mortals going up against monsters, they fight each other, and it seems to be a very entertaining idea, especially with how it seems that the Aliens vs Predator universe could go together so well. Like the Predators like to hunt dangerous things, and the aliens are very dangerous things. So perfect, right? Well, when an Alien vs Predator movie finally came out, I was a bit disappointed, and apparently I wasn't the only one. For me it had too few of the things which made an Alien or Predator movie entertaining, and the human characters were boring and mostly forgettable compared to the previous movies. And the story, while sort of doing an okay job of squeezing the Alien and Predator lore together, did take away a bit of the mystery for both, and the movie kind of forgot about those giant alien pilots from the previous Alien movies. Like it's a bit of a plot hole, get it? Because of the hole in his chest? Okay, I'll stop. Like to me, half of the fun of the original movies was just wondering, what are the aliens? Are they natural or some kind of bioweapon gone wrong? And the Predators, what kind of planet or society would they come from, which would make them want to travel light years across the galaxy just to hunt us? And apparently for hundreds of years too. The Alien vs Predator movies don't keep the awe I felt while watching the older movies, they just feel like generic action movies that have some odd plot points. Well, at least it's not as bad as the Predator movie, which I watched recently for the first time when doing research for this video, which I kinda wish I hadn't. Like I heard it was bad, but I had no idea it was that terrible. Okay, but back to the Alien vs Predator movies. The things that were missing for me were suspense and horror. They focused too much on action. For example, in the first Alien movies when the facehugger attacks, the scene is slow and darkened with all the focus on the egg, which builds tension until suddenly it strikes, and it's all over in seconds. While in the first Alien vs Predator movie they do the exact opposite. The room is well lit, you see the facehuggers crawl out the eggs, and in an almost comical way they do a slow motion Matrix type shot as they attack. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like action. That scene with the massive horde of aliens attacking the predators atop a pyramid, that's great. But did we need a group of super bodybuilder predators who get taken out fairly easily, so much in fact that they lose how intimidating they should be? I'd say no. But what if we could go back in time to before those movies, and see a different take on what an Aliens vs Predator story could be? This is where the game Aliens vs Predator 2 comes in. And while not being perfect, to me it's the closest to the ideal of what an Aliens vs Predator story could be. The atmosphere in the game is filled with suspense and pretty good building tension too. See, isn't this great? The game to me nails the feeling that I'd expect from an Alien vs Predator story. It's thrilling with some interesting characters and a few good scares. Also you get to experience the story through 3 individual but connected campaigns, being the Marine, Predator and Alien. So as you go through each, you'll get bits of the story that all help build details on each other. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, let's talk about how the game came about. The game was developed by Monolith Productions, who you'd probably know more for the Fear and Middle-earth games. They are currently working on a Wonder Woman game, which is going to be using the same formula as the Middle-earth games, with that patented Nemesis system, but hopefully no microtransactions. Yeah, before all that, they made some fairly interesting games that got the attention of Fox Interactive, who after the success of the Alien vs Predator game made by Rebellion in 1999, wanted a sequel fairly quickly, with a fancy new engine, which Monolith had thanks to developing Lithtech, which offered some big visual improvements, especially for lighting. Monolith had a look at the previous game and settled on giving their own spin on things, so they decided to tell a story with no connection to that game. Make of that what you will. So unlike the previous game, which had all the playable species stories that didn't link up in any way, this time Monolith made it so each of the species stories affect each other, though the protagonists of each conveniently never actually fight each other. Another thing they also wanted was for the levels to build tension and not always be a constant shooting gallery like the previous game had been at points, which I think they managed to do. This made the game feel like you were progressing through a story instead of just hallways of jump scares and action, though there were a few fun story bits in the previous game.
Are you guys hearing this? Are you hearing this? These guys are...
Aliens vs Predator 2 should probably be talked about more, though the reason that it isn't is likely because of legal issues. You see, basically since Monolith was bought out by Warner Brothers in 2004, Fox, the owners of the Aliens and Predator IP, really didn't want Warner Brothers to make money off stuff they own the publishing rights to, so the game is stuck in a legal limbo. Maybe one day that'll hopefully change now that the IPs are in new hands, because you won't find the game on GOG or Steam. Like maybe you could find an original copy on eBay or something, but the game is technically abandonware, so you might be be asking how did I get a copy? To which I'll gladly reply that you need to stop asking questions. Let's just say it fell off a truck, okay? Anyway, the game does have a following of fans who still play it and who have made some patches for it. They include some fixes and even offers widescreen support for the game. It's all fairly easy to get to run. Like, the game does still have some issues, maybe sometimes a door won't open or the AI might act a little silly, but they don't happen too often and can usually be fixed with a restart of the game, which is more than I can say for some other modern releases. The game's visuals to me do have a bit of that late 90s to early 2000 game charm to them. Maybe it's a bit of nostalgia, but I kinda like it. Though it does have some odd things about it. Like, some characters look a bit how I imagine a human version of a derpy pug would look. But overall, this is some really good visuals for a game from 2001, though I'm not sure how to describe its art style. It's a little cartoony but still dark. Levels and the setting do feel as though they belong in the same universe as the movies. Like, the worn corporate interiors seem like they would fit perfectly in an Aliens film. And levels outside being swamps and jungles from another world have the vibe you'd expect to find a predator hunting in, or maybe an alien hive. It fits quite nicely together with the human structures being set up just trying to survive it all. Like the pod base, which is basically this near skyscraper tall building suspended in a canyon. This wasn't built like this just so it would look cool, which it does, but it was made like that because the aliens kept overrunning the observation post that Weyland-Yutani kept trying to set up to study the aliens in the wild. They needed someplace safe that was hard for the aliens to get into, which resulted in this kinda crazy extreme defensive way of building. Though even this wasn't actually enough. As you play through the story, you'll notice that one of the pods was dropped, just to stop the spread of the aliens, and it was probably done with people still inside it. So just by seeing this you can tell a few things. First, this planet is super dangerous and that even this super defensive building isn't really safe, and that those in charge of this place see people as expendable. It's a great bit of environmental storytelling, which the game does well in other sections, as you wander around through corridors and see the aftermath of fights for survival, and places that were thought to be safe turned into nightmares. It's all good stuff. What helps with this is the lighting, which is done really well, with it adding significantly to the tension and levels for me, as you can barely see anything in the dark, and for the Marine the shoulder light feels like the only bit of safety from it. In addition to this, the way the game uses sound is also done really well, with you hearing things in vents off in the distance while knowing that you might have to face that at any second. It kept me on edge a lot. The music helps with this, as each of the campaigns for the Marine, Alien and Predator get their own sort of ambient theme that suits the tone of the gameplay. Like, the Alien one is something you'd expect to hear in a horror movie when looking from the killer's perspective, while the Marine's music felt like those scenes in Aliens when the Marines were cautiously exploring the remains of Hadley's Hope. And the Predator's music fits a hunting vibe with tribal drums and I want to say wild bird calls, though I'm no expert when it comes to music. But one of the few things the game doesn't quite nail is the music that starts when you encounter enemies, which sometimes takes the fright out of jump scares, as the moment an enemy gets close, it just starts. Especially for the Marine campaign, and it loops so often that it gets a bit annoying for me to hear it after a while. A bit more variety and subtlety would have helped. I mean, it's not absolutely terrible, but that bit of music repeated over and over eventually annoyed me rather than scared me, which I think is the opposite of what the devs were probably going for. But back to what the game does well. Sometimes it messes around with your expectations a little. I liked that. It kept me guessing what could happen. Also, you do get rewarded a bit for exploring levels with either finding extra ammo or weapons, which, unlike the previous game, was a bit tricky to do being under constant attack in some levels. While I'm mentioning the previous game, Monolith did keep the unique playstyle from each of the different campaigns. That Rebellion started in the game before this. Well, actually it was the game before that. Anyway, I'd say the gameplay has been improved in some cases, and in others I'm not so sure. Like the Marine has a good sense of progression and firepower as you go through the game, where you find bigger and better guns, but also taking them away when it suits the story, which is good because it makes you miss having a pulse rifle or shotgun, and when you get them back you feel much safer. But they did take away a bit of gameplay that was in the previous game, where you had to manage using flares versus using your image intensifier, because using both would blind you. Now you only have a limited amount of flares, which I'll admit I never ran out of, and a shuttle lamp that slowly drains battery, but if you switch it off will fairly rapidly recharge. Now it does take a while to drain, but I found it was more annoying than really building tension in the levels, as when I saw it was getting low I'd just stop, switch it off and let it charge up and then continue. Like, I know some survival horror games do this where you have a limited charge and light to explore dark places, and in those situations it kind of makes more sense to me, as it's usually a finite resource that forces you to explore an area in a rush, which builds tension. This doesn't happen in this game because it recharges, so it becomes an annoyance rather than something that's building tension, well, for me at least. It feels like a compromise, as they didn't want to have it as a resource or something you could just have on all the time. I prefer if they'd pick one side or the other, as stopping and waiting to recharge just slows the game down and not in a good way. They did include the image intensifier for the Marine, but it drains your battery too quickly to use for long periods. Maybe they made it this way so you could just quickly scan a room with it, but I never really used it, as it was easier just to chuck a flare or have my shoulder lamp on than waste battery on that. Though in the general scheme of things those are kind of minor issues, as they did get other things right. The weapons feel great to use, with the pulse rifle being a good all-round choice and the shotgun sending enemies flying in a satisfying way. And none of the weapons feel too underpowered, maybe just not the best in every situation, which feels like a good balance to me. Except maybe the sniper rifle, which I think was just included for the multiplayer, as there isn't a mission that uses it well, even though it's really powerful. Another good weapon is Alice. She's OP in a good way, but we'll chat about her later. Though I will say the machine gun does feel the most fun to use, as spinning up the barrels reminds me of that infamous scene in the first Predator movie where they cut half the jungle away just with sheer firepower. Speaking of the Predator, they got some fun new weapons in this game.
So, if I turn these two valves, boom.
That's right.
Some are a little too good, like once you get the combi stick you won't be using the wrist blade much unless you have to. I mean, the combi stick is superior just for the instant decapitation you can do if you aim it right, and it gives you a bit more reach too. The plasma caster is still in the game, but you get it much later in the story, as you were a little overpowered in the previous game when you had it right from the start. Which I mean is fun if you want to blow your way through missions, but it also meant you didn't need to sneak around as much. And isn't that half the fun of playing the Predator? Just like in the previous game, you'll appreciate the auto-targeting when facing a horde of aliens. Some of the other weapons for the Predator are a little gimmicky, like the net gun, but it can sometimes be useful, though my personal favorite is the spear gun. Just listen to how much fun the Predator is having using it. That's pure joy. Also, the Predator is a bit more acrobatic than the Marine, with a jump that can reach places the Marine can't. Very useful when hunting from above. There is one small issue in playing as the Predator, which, as I played, I noticed myself slipping into. So, unlike the previous game where the Predator's energy would either slowly recharge over time, or where you could find an occasional power pickup, now you have to manually recharge your power with the energy sip, which isn't bad, but if you have a problem with obsessively reloading weapons, then you might use this a little too often, especially if you want to keep your health up with the Medicomp. That uses a lot of energy. What doesn't help with this is your cloak uses energy too, and if you want to sneak up on enemies, then you're always going to be using power and recharging. Now, this might not be an issue for some, as I'm sure there are players who don't mind having a bit of health missing, but I'm one of those. If you give me an infinite health potion, I'll use it all the time. A bit of a fix for this would be to just have the cloak not use any power, which would reduce the constant need to keep using the energy sift. Now, you might be thinking, wouldn't that be overpowered? Nope, not really, since your cloak only works in humans and androids, and the aliens can see you even if you are cloaked. And remember, human enemies have the motion tracker, which picks you up even if you are cloaked. So I don't think it would have been a problem, but I'm no game designer, so maybe there's something I'm not seeing. Other than that, the Predator gameplay is great, as you get to stalk and hunt humans, and sneak into places they don't want you to get into, while taking a few trophies. The aliens gameplay is fairly similar to the previous game, with you being able to climb on walls and ceilings, and you're still the most fragile of all the playable races, and you're not as fast as you used to be. But don't worry, you've got some new tricks, like a leap that will close in melee range of enemies and absolutely destroy any humans you line it up with. However, there is a cost to using the attack, because the alien has a unique but appropriate way of getting health back. So if you use a leap attack to take out an enemy, then there's nothing left for you to feed on to recover some health if you get low, which will be often, so you kinda need to pick who to use it on, or just use it to close in on enemies and finish them up with your claws. The tail works a bit differently now as well. Instead of doing massive damage, it will stun most enemies. This will help you if you use it at the right time, because you can quickly stun one enemy and then focus your attacks on another, which reduces the amount of damage you take while giving you a chance to maul everything nearby to death. It's not the only way you can get kills, as you can be sneaky about it and use the shadows to get behind enemies to get a head bite from behind, before they even know what hits them. It's a lot of fun when you pull it off. The one thing I will critique about playing as the alien is the sense of progression isn't as good as the other two campaigns. Don't get me wrong though, the start to the story for the alien is probably the best I've seen in any game I've played featuring them. I kinda wish it was done more in other alien games. You start out as an escaped facehugger who can be easily killed, so you need to be stealthy when looking for the perfect target in a fairly crowded base, which should be someone who maybe doesn't get along with others, so people don't come looking for them too quickly.
You're not getting paid to daydream. Can't you find something useful to do?
Yes, sir.
That guy has issues.
No wonder he doesn't have any friends.
Perfect. Now you just need to follow and make sure they're alone when you strike. This will take you to the next stage of the alien, which is the chest burster. And you get to see it from the chest burster's perspective. It's pretty hardcore. Though even as a chest burster, you're still super vulnerable, so you need to stay sneaky. I don't know why, but this blew my mind the first time I played. Like, from the alien's point of view, it's actually a little scary being a face hugger or a chest burster, which isn't the perspective I was expecting when going in, but it's an interesting one. And starting out the game this way for the alien is perfect, because when you finally do become a fully grown alien, you get the sense of going from powerless to powerful. I mean, you still do need to hide, but at least you can attack from the shadows and take out enemies that were way more powerful than you in your shrimp form, which is great. The problem for me is once you get to this point, the sense of progress of getting stronger kind of peaks. Like, the best you're ever going to be is a drone alien, which is fun to play, but I also feel there was a missed chance where they could have done the full change of going from weak to strong by the end of the game, where you could have morphed from just a drone into a powerful Praetorian alien which needs sustained minigun fire to be stopped. Even if it was only for the last level, it would have been pretty cool to finally become a near unstoppable monster, compared to where you started as an easily killed facehugger, but that's just my opinion. All three stories feel fairly good if I'm honest, but the one that got the most attention is the Marine. But I should probably start with how he gets there, which as most of these stories do is with a distress call. This one is from a research facility on the planet LV-1201 that's studying xenomorphs in the wild and other illegal stuff. The facility is owned by Weyland-Yutani, so considering their history, something has probably gone horrifically wrong. The banter back and forth between the characters at the start really gives an alien vibe. I mean, they even included a little bit of customization on some of their armor. It's also effective at introducing the Marines' mindset, which is understaffed and overworked, and does a little foreshadowing for things you get to play with later in the game. The Marine you play as is Harrison, who has the nickname of Frosty, which he got because of his two main character traits, one being very calm under fire, and two having very terrible luck with women. Before I get into Frosty's story, I should get you up to speed on why exactly they are being sent to this planet, and show how all three of these campaigns link into each other. The reason for the distress call is because the alien you can play as causes a lot of havoc once it's morphed from a facehugger into a fully grown drone.
Commander?
What is it?
We've got a problem.
You start out by killing a few guards and freeing some xenomorphs that are held in the main base called the POC, which is connected to those pods by lengthy but well secured tunnels. You'd think this is when the distress call would have gone out, but no, the head of security at the main base makes a bad call.
Should we notify Rykov?
Sure, if you want to lose your bonus and get transferred to perimeter duty.
What if we need firepower support, sir?
Let's not overreact. I figure we're probably dealing with a single contagion. This isn't the first time one of those bastards has got out of its cage.
If the primary operation complex goes down, the pods will be isolated. We're their communication link.
Son, the POC isn't being overrun.
So far.
That guy Rykov is a little too busy with other things to help these geniuses, but I'll get into that in a little bit. What the guy in charge of the POC doesn't know is that predators like to come to this planet to hunt, and one is snuck into the base to hunt the alien you play as. This leads to a fight in the lower levels of the base that this predator loses, and you know what happens when predators lose a fight. Yeah, they like to guide with a bang. The explosion opens up a big hole in the bottom of the base, which is how Alien U escapes. But this also leaves a way open for the aliens in the wild to attack the base. That's when the distress call gets sent. And while that catastrophe was happening, that Rykov guy was carrying out a 19-year vendetta against the predator you play as. Here's a brief backstory. 19 years earlier, young Rykov used to be a Marine and was ambushed by a predator, but barely survived. Though he was paralyzed and let go by the Marines because of his injury. He managed to get fixed up with android parts for his spine, but at the cost of being in constant pain, which he has to take medication for every day. This has made him extremely vengeful towards predators. And he gets his chance for vengeance when this group of mercs he formed called the Iron Bears get hired by Weyland-Yutani as extra security for the research facility. This is where the predator you play as comes into the story, as you go on a nice enjoyable human hunt with two of your clanmates. who was surprisingly friendly. Rykov, however, manages to set a trap and captures both of your clanmates with EMP grenades, so now you need to go and rescue them. I really enjoyed this bit because you need to sneak your way into the pods past all the defenses and use the Predator's agility, so it feels very much like something a Predator would do from the movies. But yeah, Rykov was counting on you getting in. Once captured, he really enjoys hurting you because it turns out your mask is very similar to the Predator that hunted him years ago. It also seems to indicate that you're special in some way. Though this doesn't stop Rykov from letting the scientists experiment on you for a few weeks. Until the Marines finally arrive in the story. Yeah, you thought I forgot about them, eh? They take dropships down to the planet and things start going wrong from there, as weather and the lack of a beacon from the POC forces them to approach on foot. It only gets worse as Frosty gets separated from the rest of the Marines and starts seeing and hearing things that might make even a veteran a little nervous. This start of the Marine campaign is really good. It builds tension the whole time and gets your imagination going by just looking at the aftermath of what's happened. It's a great bit of story, gameplay and level design all working together. Though it is a little over the top at points, but still effective in making it feel like Frosty is in a lot of potential danger the whole time. I mean, even his commander thinks he isn't gonna make it.
What about Harrison?
We have to assume he won't make it.
Well, that's great. That's just fucking great, man.
But Frosty pushes through the base, where you know the entire time something is going to go wrong, it's just when will it. You manage to turn on the beacon and feel a bit safer now that the dropship is there with some reinforcements. But now you get sent by yourself again to get the security system activated in the POC so the aliens don't attack the dropship, which is your only way off the planet. And finally, after building it up for a while, the aliens attack, after you get the security system back online, but you don't make it back to the landing pad. Instead you grab an abandoned APC and meet up with another group of Marines. Though one of their team got caught and the rest of the Marines say she probably won't make it. Regardless, Frosty still tries to go rescue her. This leads him to a part of the POC that's been changed into a hive. In there we find eggs, which isn't a good sign if you've seen the movies, but also if you've watched them, you'll know how to handle them. Eventually Frosty finds the teammate, and it's a little too late. She's already got an alien in her, so you help her in the only way you can. This triggers the hive to send a horde of aliens after you, so you have a running gunfight back to the APC and you need to use everything you have to make it, including doors, which are pretty effective. Back at the APC, Frosty is a bit down after losing a Marine, but he needs to focus on the job, as he arrives at the tunnels leading to the pods. These have been sealed for obvious reasons, but it's the only way to reach the survivors, so Frosty gets sent to deactivate the tunnel defenses. This level has a few pretty good scares. Going through the level, you find out that the security system of the tunnel was connected in a very haphazard way with the pods. And you only find out afterwards that taking down the tunnel defenses also takes down the pod defenses at the same time. This causes a few people to die at the pods, while some aliens attack and get in. Oops. So when the Marines arrive, they aren't exactly warmly greeted. And there seems to be a conspiracy about hiding things from the Marines too. Okay, so that should be enough if you're interested in the story and don't want spoilers. Which if you want to avoid, then go to here. So after making it to the pods, the Marines need to set up comms with the others back at the POC and get in contact with the ship in orbit, since the tunnels are blocking communications. Frosty gets sent to link up with the pod's comm system, though runs into problems. This is when Danya, one of Rykov's Iron Bears, says it's the transmission lines, and that he should follow her to the lines to fix the issue. They get talking and the conversation seems to be going well.
It would take a cunning man to disable our security system.
Yeah, well, that was Mother, not me. I was just following orders.
I like brave men.
Really?
Men like my fiancé, Dmitri.
Your fiancé? Man, my luck never changes.
Don't worry, he is gone. He was outside the pods when the system went down. A casualty.
Oh. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yes, of course, I understand. I will be there soon.
Yeah, Danya and the Iron Bears kind of want a bit of revenge against Frosty for getting Dmitri killed. So they throw Frosty in prison and lie to the other Marines, telling him that he died when a convicted labourer escaped and killed him, though Frosty manages to escape. If you're wondering if you ever get to see Dmitri, yeah, you do. You get to see him in the Alien story. He seems like a nice guy.
I'm working as fast as I can, Dmitri. If you don't like being out here, why did you volunteer?
Yeah, it's dangerous for you to be alone.
When the security went down, the alien you play as in the story gets into the pods, causing a lot of trouble that the other two stories get to see some results from. Like the alien frees the Predator-alien hybrid that Frosty runs into while he's escaping. Also, the alien stops the scientists who are about to put a facehugger on the Predator you play as, while also freeing an artificial hive. It's all the kind of chaos you expect an alien to get up to. It's all a good distraction for Frosty as he continues to try and escape, though he unintentionally lets the Predator out in the process. It's a weird little crossover when the Predator stares at him while this is happening, like the timelines are overlapping or something, but we'll come back to the Predator in a bit. While Frosty is trying to make it back to the Marines, he gets contacted by someone.
Soldier, in 30 seconds you'll be dead.
What?
See that security camera over the door? I've rerouted the feed so only I can see you, but if I keep it this way for very long, someone's bound to notice.
Who are you?
I need you to get me a package.
I'm a Marine, not a delivery boy. Why me?
Because you have half a chance of getting it. I had to ditch it where I knew they wouldn't look, but I can't get back there, so you're going. Once you have my package, we'll talk about your team.
I don't negotiate with corporate spies.
I'm not negotiating. Implantation lab number 2, down the belt, buddy.
So if he wants to make it back to his team, he's got to get this disc for the spy, which means going through a few rooms holding alien eggs. Fun. Though he manages to get the disc. But his team isn't in the pods anymore, as they've been sent out on a fake rescue mission by Dr. Eisenberg, who I should explain how he fits into the story. He was sent on the first expedition to the planet years ago. That also went horribly wrong. He was the only one to survive, though in order to stay alive while in the bunker surrounded by aliens, he had to go a bit cannibal, which combined with the endless taunting of the aliens made him a little traumatized. But he was eventually rescued. Though he wasn't quite the same after that, which you might find hints about in some notes you find in the Marine story. Dr. Eisenberg now does illegal research about aliens in order to learn how to control them, in a roundabout way of getting some revenge, I think. He figures out the best way to control them is to capture the Empress, which is like an uber queen of the hive in the wild. Though with the Marine's arrival it could reveal his illegal research. So Eisenberg comes up with a plan to kill two birds with one stone, by sending the Marines on a fake rescue mission into the hive which he hopes gets them killed, and distract the aliens while with the help from some synthetic soldiers he tries to capture the Empress. The alien you play as finds out about this while at the pods, and attempts to rescue the Empress back at the hive. He disarms some bombs and chases after Eisenberg, who wants to take her off-world to study. Eventually the chase ends with a final showdown with a fight with not one but two predators right after each other, who kind of randomly want to fight you. It seems like one of the predators wants to prove himself against you in single combat, and the other one wants revenge after you beat him. Monolith really likes characters wanting revenge in their stories. Anyway, after the battle you stop a dropship from landing and finally finish off Eisenberg, who turns out to be an android, which I admit the first time seeing this ending I was more confused than surprised. But if you read some of those notes throughout the game, it gets implied that Eisenberg's mind was transferred to a synthetic body because of the injuries he got in their first mission years ago. It's not so much of a twist ending as it is more of a setup for how he's going to suffer, because he becomes a limbless trophy for the aliens for what might be a very long time in the hive. What gets me is the aliens' only reason for doing this is to torture him. Because he's an android, they can't use a facehugger on him. That's pretty twisted. Okay, but how do the two other stories end up? Well, after the Predator got some help escaping, he manages to get his equipment back while getting some revenge on the scientists for what they did to him and his clanmates. But who he really wants some vengeance on is Rykov, who's left the pods with his mask in an attempt to leave the planet. The reason that Rykov is leaving is he's come up with a plan to create a bioweapon that could wipe out the Predator race with the data he got while studying you in captivity. But the Predator at this point just wants to escape the pods by blowing up the bottom of one of the loading bays and riding a dropship like a surfboard. After crashing and then fighting a swarm of aliens followed by a fight with Pred-aliens and then even more aliens, you manage to send a signal to your clan who sends a ship to help. So now you can track down Rykov and get your mask back. Rykov figures this out and decides to lead the Predator into the alien hive as a distraction to save the rest of the Iron Bears so they can escape the planet. Also, he kinda wants revenge. On the hunt for Rykov, you find out that the Predator you play as might be some kind of royalty, because when other Predators come to help, they literally bow when giving you weapons, so you might be some kind of prince. Tracking Rykov into the depths of the hive has you going against androids and aliens and even a young queen, which can be a little tough to fight against. So by the time you get to Rykov, you're expecting one tough fight, which it can be if you don't have any remote bombs, but if you do, it can be a bit of an anti-climactic fight. Oops. With Rykov beaten and the Predator getting his mask back, he celebrates in the only way he knows how, by tearing out a spine. Though the last message in the Predator story gives a report about the Iron Bears kidnapping some bioweapon scientist near Earth, which means they're still going ahead with making their Predator bioweapon. It's an interesting cliffhanger to end the Predator story on, that's probably never gonna get a sequel to answer though. What I found funny about the Predator story is they've added the side plot in notes throughout the game about Rykov wanting to make a bioweapon to basically wipe out all Predators, and the Predator basically doesn't care or know about that. He just hunts Rykov because he wants his mask back for honor's sake. It's a bit silly, but kinda makes sense for the Predators to be like that. I mean, they are the same guys who travel light years across the galaxy just to go trophy hunting. Okay, so what was Frosty doing during all of this? He was making his way out of the pods just in time to see the Predator break the bottom of the loading bay. But Frosty needs to fight his way past some of the Iron Bears, including one in a mech suit. Though very conveniently, all his equipment is at the bottom of the loading bay, so you've got enough weapons to take it out. Using the elevator to escape the pods, he finds out who's the mystery voice he's been chatting to.
Hey, Harrison, slow down. I've got a plan.
Who the hell are you?
Oh, crap.
You're a girl?
Shitty software.
Well, hello there.
Don't even start with me.
So Tomiko explains to Frosty where his team is. He then decides to head back to the PAC to get help from the dropship and the Marines still there. On the drive there, Tomiko and Frosty start chatting about why she needs that data disk. It has information on all the illegal stuff happening at the pods, including the reason she's doing all this, to prove that her brother was murdered when he was stationed there a while back. Maybe this time Frosty will be able to assist, as his luck with helping hasn't gone so well up until this point. Making it to the PAC, he doesn't just have to deal with aliens, but a predator stalking him, while it's pretty much wrecking what's left of the other Marines at the POC, which is a cool way to build up to the fight with it. The fight itself is a bit tough, as it took me a few tries and I even only managed to get a draw with the Predator at one point. But eventually I won. After that, you make it to the dropship where Tomiko tells you how to enter the hive, and Frosty promises to come back for her once he saves his team. He even makes sure she has an escape plan. Entering the hive is where Alice finally gets to show her stuff. Suited up with heavy weapons and a nice bit of armor, you feel much safer than at any other point in the game. The level is also a bit interesting, as it's actually one of those pilot ships from the first two Alien movies. But just as you start to get attached to Alice, she gets taken out in a fall. Frosty's luck with ladies strikes again. So with just a pistol, you go deeper into the alien infested hive, where eventually find your team fighting a queen in a large room with a movie reference in the middle of it. The team pull out and seal you in accidentally with the queen, which you need to fight with some heavy weapons you find all around the room.
Come on, you bastard! Come on, you too!
After bringing it down, the team break open a hole for you to escape out of, where you see them running for a ledge. Some cover fire would have been nice with all these aliens chasing me though. At the ledge, the dropship needs you to clear the area before it lets you on board, and you get to see a missile attack on the queen before finally taking down two Praetorian aliens and escaping. Frosty contacts Tomiko to tell her they're on their way to go pick her up when...
We did it. We're coming for you.
You'll pass on the data to my father?
You can give it to him yourself. We're airborne now.
Get clear then. Hurry.
What are you talking about? I'm on my way.
No time.
Don't give up, Tomiko. You hear me?
They're not going to save this place. I won't let them.
Whatever you're doing, stop! Get to the landing bay.
What's your first name anyway?
Andrew.
Take care, Andrew. Tomiko out.
Tomiko! Tomiko!
Well, at least Frosty's character traits are consistent. As you leave the planet, Tomiko sets off a massive explosion that makes the chances of Whale and Yutani restarting there again very unlikely. It's a bit of a depressing ending. Maybe the developers watched Alien 3 a little too much. Well, at least the Alien and Predator sort of got happy endings. I enjoy going through this game again. The story and characters very much feel like they belong in the Aliens and Predator universe. And if you pay attention, the story can be a bit deeper than just aliens fighting predators, with corporations and individuals all following their own goals while these monsters get thrown into the mix to show how greed and vengeance can sometimes come back to literally bite you. And it does this with 3 separate protagonists too, which is hard enough to do with just one main character in a game, let alone 3. Combine this with the gameplay and story that works well with each of the playable races, and it makes one of the best Aliens vs Predator games I've ever played. I feel it's a classic that more people should experience. Hopefully one day it'll somehow finally find a way past its legal hurdles so more people can play it, and see this really cool vision of where the Aliens vs Predator stories could have gone. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did like it, then consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
I don't like this.